G'day, I'm Pete, the Aussie Bush Cop. In 2012 I retired from the New South Wales Police and moved to beautiful King Island. And today I'm sitting out the front of the King Island Bakery. Come inside and have a coffee with me and I'll tell you a few stories. G'day everybody, thanks for joining me again. Before we start, I just wanted to pass on a birthday greeting to a lady that I know watches the channel routinely, and her name's Deb. Deb lives on King Island. And happy birthday, Deb, and I know that you and your husband are moving soon and we're going to miss you. I'm going to share some stories this morning against the backdrop of what happened in Victoria with the murder and I expect the attempted murder of a third police officer. I run out of adjectives to describe how horrible that must be. I know that my first wife, that her brother was murdered in Crescent Head, and we've covered that story already. I have some first-hand knowledge of the horror that will have been visited upon the wives and the loved ones of these two officers, and of course their colleagues. I would encourage any of you to go out of your way to speak to police officers, whether they're standing out the front of a railway station or you live in the country, Victoria, just drop in and say, listen, I'm really sorry about what happened. It would mean you might get a bluff response from them, but I can tell you that they'll really appreciate that you care. So the stories I have this morning, as I said, are against the backdrop of what happened in Victoria. And some of the things that happened in my experience. In fact, just the last podcast we did, I told the story of myself and another officer driving down a long driveway at night to a person that was having a mental health episode and threatening to harm himself with a rifle. And we had to go down there, and my partner said, we could just get shot right here. The first story this morning was as a result of an investigation that detectives did into an armed robbery that happened in this country town. It happened at a business house. I won't say what business house it was because there's no point in overly identifying people. And so this armed robbery occurred. The detectives did an investigation into that and clearly identified the offender. They then required an arrest team to arrest the offender, and the offender lived in a farmhouse. And again, like the one I just mentioned, down a fairly long driveway that made us very visible when we're driving down the driveway to effect the arrest. Now, the benefit we had in this job was that there was an element of surprise. The offender didn't know that he'd been identified. He didn't know he was about to be arrested. So when we went, as much as you can when you're driving a cage truck and down a typical farmer's driveway, which has generally got bumps and humps in it, we went down there as quickly as we could. We, of course, had a briefing before the arrest back at the police station, who was going to do what. We had a little bit of information about the layout of the property, where outbuildings were. And we knew that there was a couple of outbuildings at the back of the property, at the back of the house, which of course provides somewhere for the offender to run to and then become, holed up in one of those buildings. And of course, that's just not what you want. The property was unknown to us. We're not familiar with it. And of course, to the offender, he's very familiar with it and can be heavily resourced with whatever weapons he might choose to have at his disposal. So it's a high-risk incident, or potentially high risk, and it's full of drama. So we, at some point, you've got to pull the Band-Aid off the sore, and you just got to do it quickly. So we got there, and we were the lead car in. We went down in our cage truck, and we went down to the back of the house and knocked on the door, announced our office, and then because we knew there was a warrant for his arrest, and we reasonably knew he was in there, so that means we have the power to, if need be, to forcibly enter the premises. I don't remember having to kick in a door. I think we just opened up, we announced our office and then quickly entered when I say we, I mean me and my partner, General Duties Police, with our 40 calibre Glock on our belts. And we went in and it all happened uneventfully, I'm glad to say. He was there, I think from memory, the room that we arrested him in looked like it might have been a veranda that had been closed in. If you're familiar with country Australian farmhouses, they had big verandas at the back, and it looked like the veranda had been closed in. Anyway, we just went in there. As I said, it was a largish room, and we effected the arrest. We just put him up against the wall, did the typical, spread your arms, spread your legs, searched him, handcuffed him, and then the detectives come through the front door, and that's as much of it as I can remember. The next story I will share with you happened in back then. This is the really bad part of Dubbo, and I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but that part of Dubbo, geographically speaking, was 1/13 of the city. Dubbo back then had a population of around 40,000 people, and I worked this out for myself by looking at the map. It was 1/13 of the city where this really bad part was, and in a whole year, I went through all my notebooks, in a whole year there was only 2 occasions that I didn't go there. So you work that out. Your maths might be better than mine, but it's a high percentage at the time we ended up in that estate. And this is where this happened. And it happened at night. As we routinely did, we did routine patrols of that part of town, and we saw a party. I don't know that we were called there by other people, but there was a party in the front yard. And what then happened was that maybe it was a noise complaint. I remember having to go there, and we walked into the front yard, and we heard someone say, "Get 'em, boys." And what that meant was that they had ready-made Molotov cocktails hidden behind a fence or I remember there's some barricade that you couldn't see them, and they quickly got these bottles, glass bottles, that had flammable material in them with a cloth rag in them already. And before we knew it, we had Molotov cocktails bursting at our feet. So that meant we made what's known as a tactical retreat. We then went, and then they started fighting amongst themselves, as they often do. We then there was a high point about maybe 100 metres away on a vacant piece of ground. There was a high point, and we could observe from there. By then, an inspector of police had arrived, and he said, "We're going to stay here, boys, until if they start getting into serious trouble and they're really hurting themselves, then we'll go in," which ended up happening. We then had to go in again and separate people. And during that episode of this job, one of the police was hit over the head with a scooter, a scooter that a 10-year-old kid might get around, and was, that's pretty serious. We then had there was a policeman there who put himself at significant risk, and in the normal flow of events should have been recognised with some sort of a decoration for doing what he did, because he extricated this policeman that had been hit over the head. And that just shows how serious, you might say not an ordinary event, but it was an ordinary event for us, how serious these things can just erupt. The last job or story I'll have for you this morning was when I was a fairly new policeman, and I was within my first year of being in the coppers, and I was a probationary constable. And was during the day, and again was in the same estate as the last job. It was during the day, and we were called there by a member of the public. And when you're in your first number of weeks of being in the police, of being out on the street, you work with a field training officer, generally abbreviated to FTO. and I was with my FTO, and we went to this house, and there was a number of men inside this house who were just fist punching each other in the head, as you do in that part of the world. And I remember walking up, and the FTO was not only was he a field training officer, he was also a member of the tactical police who have special training, and they're in regional areas and they can be called upon when something really bad happens until the specialist police from Sydney can get there. He was a State Protection Support Unit officer. Anyway, and I remember walking up the footpath to the front door, and the front door was in the middle of the house. I remember walking up, and I remember thinking, are we going in there? As in my mind's eye, I could almost see the sides of the house bellowing out from almost like in a cartoon show, bellowing out with the violence that was going on inside. Anyway, we walked up, and then my FTO sort of stepped off to the left, and we walked around the side of the house, and we're looking through the windows. I can't actually remember what happened after that, but I know we went in there, and whether we arrested anybody, I just can't remember. It was quite a while ago. But when we left, I said to the FTO, I shared my thought, are we going in there? So he said, well, we weren't going in there, Pete, until we had a look first. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.